Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to go through a full review of round one of the NRL and the two opening round games from the 2025 AFL season. This is something that I've always done is keep track of every matchup, not just from a statistical perspective, but after every game, I do a quick write-up on each team's performance, what they did well, what they struggled with, and how they performed that constituted that end result for that game. So when I'm reviewing games and when I'm looking at team form, I'm not just looking at the final score of their last four matches or, who they versed. I'm also looking at what happened in those games. What were those things that contributed to them winning or what contributed to them losing that game? Because a lot of the time, the final score never really gives you the full story. And when you combine this with then the statistics that are all in the bet finders, gives you a full picture of team performances. So I'm going to go through this. This is going to be one of the new videos that I'm adding for this season to review the previous round before we then look ahead to the upcoming round with the try scorers and the betting trends. I really appreciate you guys following along on the channel. My goal with this channel is to help make sure that you're a profitable bettor on the NRL and the AFL. So that's the whole purpose of these videos, is to help you make money. If you have any questions about anything when it comes to making money betting, definitely put them in the comments below. For the opening round of the NRL, we ended up going 7-2 on our main bets in the NRL best bets. Only game we got wrong was the Dolphins Rabbitohs game. We had two plays in that game, but due to the cyclone, I made sure that I sent out all the bets on Thursday. So everyone in the NRL membership had all the bets for the upcoming round. But that was before the Dolphins decided to leave a few players behind and didn't take, the expected team down there, which was costly in the end. But as you can see behind me, that all that weather from that cyclone has now passed by. Even if you followed on my Instagram channel, you probably would have seen this window behind me here leaking, the balcony window. There was water coming in through there as well. It didn't really work out. I had to move everything, away from this area, all the computers and everything. I think kind of the main problem with that is this window right behind me that you see here was in the direct line of the way the wind was blowing for about 2 days straight. So the first day of me sitting here in the office was very tough. So I moved everything out to more so the middle of the apartment. That was the only game we got wrong for the NRL, that Rabbitohs Dolphins game, but we got seven right of the other games. So I'm going to run through, each of those matchups. And then in the AFL, there ended up just being the two games. So firstly, the Swans and Hawks, we got that game right. And then also got our bet overline just in the GWS Collingwood game. It kind of came down to the wire a little bit, but we're able to start the AFL season 2-0 as well. So firstly, looking at the NRL, this is including the two games in Las Vegas that were played the Sunday prior. 7 of the 8 favorites won outright. So it's a very, very good week for favorites. And then the Raiders were the only underdog to win their game outright. Obviously, the Warriors were a favorite, but Rabbitohs won that game comfortably. And then of the 8 games, 5 of them went over the total points line. So, a slight lean towards the over during week 1 of the season. Looking at the Raiders-Warriors game. So, as I said, Raiders covered, one outright, and then this game went under the total. It was a very impressive, especially defensive performance from the Raiders. We spoke about how the Warriors attack was probably going to struggle a bit with the players that they've lost. The Raiders still, held them out well. They only conceded 2 tries for the whole game, and one of those was during a sin bin period late in the game. They also dominated the meters battle against the Warriors, who, in previous seasons have been a very, very strong side at getting those meters in the middle of the field and also limiting meters defensively. So those are definitely positive signs for the Raiders forward pack. They only completed 69% of their sets, so fairly low completion rate. But a lot of the time, the game was fully in their control, so it didn't really matter in the end. This win and their performance here does set up a pretty good game against the Broncos in week number 2. And they come into that game on extended rest. But not a great deal because the Broncos did get the Thursday night game, so it's only an extra few days for the Raiders, and they do have to travel back from America. For the Warriors, it was a very, very poor overall performance in the opening game of the season, which we did expect, and I was surprised they were favored for this game, and they let it slip away early. They're down 16-0 after the first 32 minutes. Once again, they won the penalty count, which was spoken about, doesn't really matter, and they completed their sets better, but they weren't able to turn that possession and then that also completion rate into points. They missed 44 total tackles, and I think off of that performance, it's going to be very, very tough for them against the Seaeagles in their next game. Then the other Vegas game was the Panthers against the Sharks. Penrith ended up running out winners, covered the spread, and the game went over the total points line. I feel like Penrith just did what they needed to do to win this game. They stepped up after trailing early in the first half, built a 16-point lead early and then into the second half. And watching the game, like even when Penrith were under pressure during those early stages, like they weren't worried, like they didn't panic. Like you can sometimes see teams panicking as soon as they're down on the scoreboard, forcing extra passes and, then making more mistakes. But they're obviously, been the best side the past 4 years that, they just stick to the game plan, execute the game plan, and then, that gets them the results at the end of the day. And, off that performance, it should be another comfortable win for them when they face the Roosters next week, which then after that sets up the grand final rematch with the Melbourne Storm. For the Sharks, I think they played fairly well. They got underway. They scored an early try, which was a really, really good start for them. And when looking through the try score log, they conceded their tries in bunches. So Penrith scored in the 26th and 28th minute, and then again in the 48th and 52nd minute of this game. So that's 4 tries, and across those 4 tries is effectively a 6-minute period of the game. And, against the best defensive side, to concede 4 tries in a period of 6 minutes makes it very, very hard for you to win overall. So they need to avoid like those defensive lapses. I doubt they're going to do it against, the lesser sides. Important they don't make that mistake. Statistically, this was a very, very even game. There wasn't a great deal between the two sides. And the Sharks did fight back. Like when they went down in the second half, they did fight back to bridge the margin and make it a contest and still be in with a chance to tie the game during the final 5 minutes or so. They do have winnable games coming up against the Cowboys and Rabbitohs, and it is important they capitalize on those during this tough early stretch of the season for them. Then on the Thursday night, the Roosters at home to the Broncos. The Broncos were very, very dominant, winning and covering as a favorite, and the game well and truly went over the total. Feel like for the Roosters, like it couldn't have been a much worse season opener for them. They conceded 50 points, and no team has ever gone on to win the premiership when conceding 50 points in a game during the regular season. It's expected they're going to need that bit of time to adapt after having so many changes to their lineups, and without Sam Walker, their halves pairing has a lot of issues, and I think their attack's going to struggle a lot this season. And we even saw in this game, it kind of relied on a few moments of brilliance by Dom Young and stuff out on the edges to pick up those tries. If this game, like against the Broncos, wasn't over at halftime when it was 20-4, it was shortly after the Broncos ran in 4 more tries the following 16 minutes after the break. For the Roosters, like they also not only, struggled to score, but they couldn't generate meters in the middle, and their overall attack was just a bit disjointed. And, without that leadership in the middle, lacked overall execution. And for the Broncos, they, couldn't have been a better start to the season for them after 2024. Like, obviously, the Roosters played bad, but the Broncos really didn't give them a chance. They dominated all the statistics in this game. Roosters got an early try. We did back Dom Young to score a try in this game at 2:35. And he got the try really early on, so that was very good. But after that point, the Broncos rolled in 7 straight tries and had 59% possession for the game. They had 10 line breaks to 3. Their halves pairing of Ben Hunt and Adam Reynolds, which is, I think, the oldest halves pairing in the competition. That worked really, really well. And their forward pack was dominant. And they have the Broncos outside backs are, very good as well. They're very strong and agile, so can turn those half chances into breaks. So, so far for the Broncos, all positive signs. Now Michael Maguire has taken over as coach. It looks like a very, very different side to what we saw last season. Then the Tigers, this was the lowest scoring game of the weekend. The Tigers covered the spread. as underdogs, and the game went under. So only a 2-point margin. The Tigers played well. They led at halftime 8-0, but inevitably let the game slip away. For the Tigers, they still only generated one line break for this game and conceded 7 and missed 51 tackles. So there's still those issues there on both sides of the ball. And they were playing one of the worst attacking sides from last year. So, for them still can miss 51 tackles, it's definitely worrying, and that defense still looks to be an issue. Newcastle also gave them plenty of chances. They made 16 errors and only completed 64% of their sets. Obviously, the Tigers are expected to improve this year, but there's a few worrying signs. The good news for them is they get Api Carousel back and Jaron Bueller back into the side in round 2, where they'll face Parramatta. And after Parramatta's performance against Eels, this is a really good opportunity for the Tigers to get that early win and give them some confidence going forward. For the Knights, they did pretty much just enough to get over the line and beat the Tigers here. Their defense was good, but they were playing the worst attacking team from last year. And in attack, they struggled to complete their sets. As I said, 16 errors, 64% completion rate, but still with that, made 7 line breaks. So they were good at, breaking tackles, but once again, playing the worst defensive side from last year. So we're going to get a better line on the Knights when they play the Dolphins in round number 2. For the Rabbitohs-Dolphins game, the Rabbitohs covered and the game went under the total. This was a very disciplined performance by the Rabbitohs under Bennett. Looking at their lineup, they're missing quite a number of important players for them. So this season, I think when those players are out, success is going to be built on good completion rate, not making errors, and being strong defensively, which kind of does fit Bennett's game plan we regularly see with him. The Rabbitohs completed 85% of their sets, only made the 6 errors, but in attack only managed the 2 line breaks and 20 tackle breaks. So it's just kind of rolling through the sets compared to what we saw from them last year. I think they did benefit defensively a little bit from the Dolphins making mistakes at key stages in this game. But, Rabbitohs were good enough to grind out the win in a close game and get a chance to go 2-0 when they play the Dragons this week. For the Dolphins, it was kind of an average performance. There's obviously excuses, interrupted preparation, having to move the game down to Sydney. And they did have opportunities to win this game in attack and put up more points, but the Rabbitohs defense held them out. They made mistakes at key stages, and the execution just wasn't quite there for the Dolphins, which is something that's probably going to improve, obviously, as the season progresses. They defended well against a side that wasn't making mistakes. It's one thing to, keep an eye on is how teams defend against sides that are error-prone or mistake-free. Defending against sides who keep on completing their sets, putting good kicks, back you up in tough field position is a lot more difficult than sides who constantly turn the ball over and, blow chances, those kind of things. For the Dolphins, the next 4 weeks for them could definitely shape their season. When we look at their upcoming games, over the next 2 weeks, they'll play the Knights and Tigers, both definitely winnable games, and then followed by the Broncos and Titans to their local derbies. These 4 weeks, then followed by the Panthers and Storm. If they don't pick up wins, especially against the Knights and Tigers, this could be a very, very long season, because I doubt, at this stage, they're going to be beating the Panthers and Storm in round 6 and round 7. Then we had the Dragons Bulldogs, the early game on Saturday. The Bulldogs covered and the game went over. For the Dragons, this is a game that they lost in the 10 minutes either side of halftime. So they conceded 4 of the 5 tries during 2 10-minute periods. So that 30-minute mark to the 40-minute mark and the 40-minute to the 50-minute mark. So playing out the first half and then coming out of the sheds better, very, very important for the Dragons. Or potentially, the Bulldogs just excelled in that era, was something we can kind of monitor going forward. They did try and mount a late comeback when they were trailing by 22 points. They scored 3 straight tries, but obviously it wasn't enough in the end, losing 20 points to 18. Both sides made quite a lot of mistakes, and it was a bit of a messy game, I feel like, in the end. In one of the games this weekend that was played in good conditions. For the Dragons, they play the Rabbitohs this week, so another potential tricky matchup against another strong defensive side from what we've seen so far. And then they have the bye before playing the Storm. Then for the Bulldogs, I think they'll be happy they were able to make sure they got the win in this game, but it wasn't like a clinical performance. I guess there's still, issues for them to work out. The first 30 minutes was kind of very, very even. And as I said, they broke away in that period just before halftime and then built their lead to 28-6 just after halftime. They missed 35 tackles, let the Dragons back in, and it was still a contest late, which is something they can't afford to do against the good sides in the competition. But overall, even though they missed 35 tackles, if you've read the NRL betting guide, we spoke about how the Bulldogs were a top 4 defensive side last year, but missed the most tackles. And we talk about one of the sections I put in the book was talking about how missed tackles correlate with line breaks and correlate with tries scored, and how teams can overcome missing tackles by not turning those missed tackles into line breaks. So if you haven't downloaded the free betting guide, definitely have a read of that. You got plenty of time before round 2, and there's still, the whole season ahead. So it's all valuable information to make sure you're making good decisions. But overall for the Bulldogs, their defense was still good. They only conceded 1 try in the first 55 minutes. One thing I did pick up on, they conceded 3 tries to Christian Tuipulotu. So he plays on the left wing for the Dragons. So for the Bulldogs, they're going to definitely need to fix that right edge defense going forward. And, don't be surprised if teams look to target that side with them going forward. We're going to talk about that in the try scorer videos as the rounds go on. For the Bulldogs, it's a really good opportunity now for them to start the season 5-1. We spoke about how they have a fairly easy draw, especially early on. Titans, Eels, Sharks, Knights, and Rabbitohs are the next 5 games. All of those are very, very winnable. The Broncos game in Brisbane is a little bit of a tricky matchup, but then they have the Titans, Raiders, Roosters, and Dolphins all before their second bye. So Bulldogs are definitely well positioned if you're considering backing them for the premiership or in futures markets like top 4. I'd definitely do that sooner rather than later because their upcoming schedule, they realistically on paper should win every game except against the Sharks and Broncos all the way through to round 17 against the Panthers. Realistically, they're likely going to start favorite in almost all those other games. So it could be definitely a good futures bet the way their season is shaping up. For the Seaeagles Cowboys game, this was a high scoring one. The Seaeagles covered and it well and truly went over the total. This was a really impressive season opener for Manly. They led 42-0 and just gave up 2 late tries in the jump time in that final 8 minutes. They had 11 line breaks to 3. And even though the Cowboys didn't make mistakes, they completed their sets very, very well. The Seagulls just didn't give them opportunities and control possession. They had 57% off possession in this game. Looking at the runs, 228 runs for Manly, only 154 for the Cowboys. Manly were also the only side to gain over 2,000 meters. They had 2,114 meters gained. And, it's a very, very good attacking performance. They scored 3 tries in the first 10 minutes. And kind of from that point, the game was almost over, just the way they came out and just put the Cowboys away very, very early. They're likely to go 4-0 to kick off the season. Manly were one of the sides that I thought, are a definite contender this year. Of those sides, out of kind of your big 3 of your Panthers, Storm, Sharks, Manly for me are definitely next in line. And as I said, they could definitely start 4-0. They play the Warriors, Raiders, and Eels over the next 3 weeks before facing the Storm, Sharks, and Panthers, and then another game against the Sharks in a 6-week period following that. So it's important they can get away to a 4-0 start. For the Cowboys, it was a very, very poor performance from them overall. And I think they're a little bit shell-shocked, with those early tries and then down 24-0 at halftime. The final 2 tries, made the scoreboard look a little bit better, I guess. But I don't think you can read too much into that, that's for sure. Attack-wise for the Cowboys, there looks to be a lot of issues. I've spoken previously about how they've without Valentine Holmes and Carl Felt, who have been their leading try scorers in recent seasons, and how they're going to overcome that does look a problem as well. And obviously Chad Townsend didn't have the best game with the Roosters, and that's going to take time to develop. but he did have a fairly good season last year with the Cowboys, and they're going to miss him in the halves. For the Cowboys, their next 4 weeks is definitely very, very tough as well. You could even say the next five: the Sharks, Broncos, Raiders, Panthers, Rabbitohs. There's very much concerns there for the Cowboys, and of what we've seen so far, it's likely that they're going to miss finals this year. Then the final game of the round, Sunday afternoon, the Storm against the Eels. The Storm were expected to win this game and win it fairly convincingly. They covered the spread, and the game went over the total. The first half from the Storm was absolutely dominant and couldn't have been really much better. They scored 8 tries and led 46-6 at halftime. And during that first half, Melbourne looked like they could pretty much score a try on every play. And, when going through the game, you could just go forward a couple of minutes and they're over again. It was just, absolutely there's every play breaking down the Eels defense. They had 9 line breaks. 8 of those came in the first half, though. So the Parramatta came out and won the second half. So after trailing 46-6 at halftime, the Eels won the second half 12 points to 10. But keep in mind, the game was over. Melbourne definitely took the foot off the gas. One other thing for Melbourne, they had 8 different try scorers in this game. So, plenty of variety across the side. We had Coates score a try. He scored a double. They have the bye this week, and then they get their grand final rematch against the Panthers in round 3, and that's going to be down in Melbourne, which looks to shape up as a really, really good game. For the Eels, this was a tough start to the season. They weren't expected to win this game, that's for sure, and were missing Mitch Moses. But that wasn't really going to help stop the Storm attack. Having Moses in defense wasn't going to stop all those line breaks and points. It would have enhanced their own attack. And so I don't think overall it would have made too much of a difference. Their second half was a lot better, and starting games are better going forwards, definitely going to be important. They get the Tigers this week. So definitely go for a much easier opposition than playing Melbourne in Melbourne. And for the Eels, don't think it's great signs for them the way they've started the season. There looks to be a lot of issues, especially defensively. But we want to see how they go up against, just slightly. They were playing a top 2 attacking side, so we do want to see how they go defensively against the lower side, that's for sure. Then in the AFL, so the first 2 games, the Swans against Hawthorn. Hawthorn covered the spread as small favourites. This market chopped and changed a little bit, but Hawthorn ended up starting favourites. They covered the spread, and the game just went over the total points line by a couple of points. This was a very, very even game in the first quarter. Then Hawks came out, won the second quarter well. The Swans made a bit of a comeback during the third when the conditions worsened. The rain hit during that period. But then Hawthorn ended up running out winners, kept the Swans goalless in the fourth quarter. And this was a really important win for Hawthorn to start the season, beating Sydney in Sydney. That sets them up very, very well going forward over the next few weeks. They kept the Swans to just 40 inside 50s. And, overall, they played a good team defense. They picked up Josh Battle and Tom Barras to strengthen their back 6, and that allowed them to also move James Sicily into the forward line late in the game. For the Hawks, the only real negative was the injury to James Worpel. I think it's an ankle injury that could keep him out for a few weeks. For the Swans, they kicked a couple early goals, started well, but overall, Hawthorn controlled the majority of this game. They had their little glimmer of hope midway through the third, but couldn't then finish the job in the fourth quarter. For Sydney, they do need to give their forwards more opportunities. Not only do they only have the 40 inside 50s, they're also hammered in the clearances. Hawthorn won the clearances 47-33. So the middle of the field for Sydney is definitely an area they need to improve. And it doesn't really get any easier for them. Even though they're at home again this week, they're going to be playing the Brisbane Lions in the grand final rematch. It's a bit of a tough start to the season for Sydney before they then travel over to Perth to play Fremantle. Then the second game, GWS against Collingwood. GWS won and covered as underdogs at home, and the game went under the total. GWS, this was a really good start to the season for the Giants, picking up that win as an underdog against Collingwood, who there is a bit of expectation about this year. So far, they definitely haven't lived up to it. And without Tom Green in the middle, we saw GWS still be very, very strong. Josh Kelly stepped up. He had 36 disposals, and combined with Callahan, they combined for 12 clearances. Inside 50s for this game were very, very even, but Collingwood were super inaccurate. They surely need to work on their goal kicking, only going 6 goals, 16 behinds, 22 scoring shots from 55 entries, and only 6 goals from 55 entries. That was a huge issue, and that's kind of what forced this game under the total. If Collingwood kicked a bit straighter, it likely would have gone over. The third quarter was super, super low scoring. That's one thing I keep track of in the AFL bet finders is teams scoring and points conceded by quarter, by half, so we can see where any trends pick up. If teams come out into that third quarter and just play lockdown, and then we'll just see what happens in the fourth, or do teams come out in the second quarter and the scoring picks right up. This information can really, really help with your betting decisions. So that's why, I keep track of as much data as I possibly can, and then set it up in a way that makes it easy to analyze the game. So not only, in the memberships, you get access to everything I'm betting, where you can just follow along with those plays, but you also have the tools to research and find plays and pick bets yourself using actual information and not just relying on gut feel. Like a lot of people just rely on gut feel and then wonder, why am I losing money betting? Why am I just constantly depositing into these accounts? And then once they add in and can see how much better bets they can make, when they start using statistics of how teams perform, how they've been trending in their recent form, and make decisions and betting decisions from that, the results turn around dramatically. So, if you actually want to make money from betting and you want to have more bets that win, then I definitely recommend adding statistical research into your process before picking your bets. Other thing for Collingwood, just looking at their schedule going forward, it's definitely a little bit worrying for them. Of their next 5 games, they have to play Port Adelaide, Western Bulldogs, Carlton, Sydney, and Brisbane. Honestly, I'd be really surprised if Collingwood win 2 of those games. I feel like they could really be 1-5 through their first 6. It's definitely concerning times for the Pies, and it's important they really turn this around quickly. Otherwise, it could tend to be a long way back from there. So that's how, my review of opening round of the AFL and round 1 of the NRL. I'm really happy for all the Best Bets members that we could start the season combined going 9-2 across the 2 sports, 7-2 in the NRL and 2-0 in the AFL. Lots more games this week, especially in the AFL. Now we've got a full round, not just 2 games from the opening round. So there's going to be more AFL bets this week. All those plays will be out before game number 1 on Thursday night. If you want to follow along and profit this season, definitely check those out. I'll put the link in the description for both the AFL and NRL. And make sure you've downloaded the 2025 NRL betting guide. It's completely free. It's going to give you a totally new look at the NRL and how you can make money betting on it. So definitely excited for you to go through that and use it to advantage this season. Thanks guys for watching, and stay tuned for more videos coming up this week.